Hello to all my friends and family, and welcome to Jim's 5am Club. And as you can see, we've got a brilliant spring day. The cloud, the rain, the wind have all disappeared, and we're back to where we want to be in terms of these clear, blue-skied spring days. And it's absolutely wonderful. This morning I was here and it was terrible. It was raining, it was windy, it was cold, and now you look up into the sky and all you see is just blue sky and just brilliance. How wonderful is it? Anyway, let's go on a walk and talk, and I want to have a chat to you today about a topic that I got near and dear to my heart. And in a previous 5am Club, I talked about my childhood, and I reminisced when I was 14 and I went away to Brisbane on a rugby tour and played rugby up there, and I was billeted by a family, an Australian family, for just a couple of days, but I got to live with another family and understand and just appreciate that there are so many differences that each and every family has, and the things we take for granted aren't necessarily available in all families, and to appreciate the differences, but also to wonder about how common and how many things we have in common. And I guess the big question is, and the big question I want to just talk about today is, when did you realise that your family was different to all the other families around you? When I was growing up here in Australia, I grew up in a migrant family. My parents migrated here from Greece. I was born here, but I grew up with parents whose first language was Greek, and whose cultural background was Greek. But not only did I grow up in a family where my parents were Greek and spoke Greek, but also all my relatives were Greek and spoke Greek, and the friends of my parents were Greek and spoke Greek, and they were generally from a very similar sort of background. They came from the Peloponnese, and back in those days, the social circles were quite tight, and you basically hung out, or my parents hung out with people who were Greek, but more importantly, they hung out with people who were Greek, but from the same parts of Greece. And just in case you're not aware, each Greek community had its own club, had its own get-togethers, dances. So we'd frequent the Corinthian dances when I was growing up. So you can understand how important socialising with people from a similar background was. But as I grew up and I started to socialise with other people from school, you started to realise that there were some vast differences in each family, and what I thought was just standard and taken for granted wasn't necessarily the same for every other family, from different cultures and from different family structures. It was only when as I went to Queensland and I realised that there were differences. And then I went to university and I found further differences in family backgrounds, even amongst my Greek friends. I went to a private school, a private boys' school, and all of a sudden when I was at uni, I started to socialise with people who went to other schools, who came from other parts of Greece, and there were differences, interesting differences, and I was very, very fortunate to have come across friends from different parts of Greece, because I did gain an appreciation for the wider Greece and the island life and people from different islands, people from different parts of the mainland. And it was all part of my cultural experience. You learn different dances, you learn different ways to socialise and different ways to party. But then you get older and older, and then you realise that you ask yourself the question, what is it? What defines being Greek? What defines being Australian? And you slowly start to understand and to realise that being Greek, there is no single formula. Or being Australian, there's no single formula. When my children were young, I remember hearing a song which said, there are 20 million different ways of saying that you're Australian. Each and every person is different, and each and every person can claim they're Australian. And also from my Greek side, I've started to realise now with Facebook and internet that we all have many, many different views, divergent views, and what I took for granted as being standard in terms of being Greek, my Greek orthodoxy, I've all of a sudden realised that that is not necessarily a common theme amongst Greeks, because there are 12 godders, there are atheists, there are people who have different beliefs and still claim to be Greek. And all of this is part of my growing up and basically finding my way in the world. And it's a real awakening, and I'm sure we've all come across this awakening that the things that hold us together, the things that keep us together, are very, very rare. And what I thought, as I said before, was the common bond that all Greeks had and kept them together, I realise as I'm getting older that there is no real common ground amongst anybody and everybody, and we just need to be creative and try and identify the things we have in common and to hold those close to our hearts amongst our different friends, amongst our different groups, and not to worry about ticking too many other boxes, because it's virtually impossible to tick all the boxes that you thought were the common things when you were growing up. So there you go. I guess it's an interesting question for all of us to try and identify, and especially people when they get married. Initially they identify all the things that they have in common, and that brings them together. And then the more time you spend together, the more you start to identify all the things that you have which are not in common. And it's quite interesting, the number of people that I speak to who identify different priorities in their lives, and the things that some cultures have as a high priority, other people have as a non-priority. And these are the things that become challenging as we get older, because what I find is as I get older, I want to go back to my future. I want to go back to my childhood. I want to go back to my comfort zone. All the things that my parents taught me, all the things I did with my uncles and aunts, to relive those with my family and friends. But you realise that all of those things that you held dear to your heart are no longer held dear to the heart of all the other people you have around you, because they've grown up differently and it's not a key point for them. Church and Christianity is no longer as important to a wider range of people as what it once was, which will cause challenges and will cause pain when it comes to the later years of your life, because there are things, as we said, that we thought are common amongst everybody, but as we get older we realise that they're not all that common at all. But that's where I want to leave it, I think, for today. It's an interesting topic and a challenging topic that we're all going to face, regardless of who you are. And it's up to each and every couple, up to each and every family, to hold the cultural ideals and traditions that have been passed to them, to hold them as close and as dear to them as possible, and to try and pass them on. But the reality is, the things that we, or my generation, had as important, it's going to be really challenging and difficult to pass on to our children, because each generation, I guess, drops off certain priorities and picks up other priorities which shape and change us. There's no doubt about it. You know, I guess if my parents came back, or if my grandparents came back and looked at how their families had changed, you know, they'd probably be shocked to see the variation and the change. In some areas they'd be shocked, other areas they'd be delighted. Who knows? Who knows what their reaction would be? But the truth is that we're all changing. We're all changing. We're all becoming a lot more casual. We're becoming less focused on the things that may have been important to our parents' and grandparents' generation, and we're basically going with the flow to keep the peace with children, grandchildren, and the current generations. Anyway, let's finish off there with a positive affirmation. I'm alive, I am well, and I feel absolutely great. To my friends and family, stay connected, stay relevant, and most importantly, give a thought to what's important in your life, and try and make the most of your cultural and family values that have been passed to you. And where possible, try and keep those family values and keep them alive, and keep the air circulating in their lungs, because they're key to our identity, our family identity. And if you give everything up, if you fail to stand up and fight for the things that are important and things that have been handed to you, then you may end up with nothing at all and be culturally vacuous as an individual and as a family unit. And it may have a bigger impact on us later in our lives, as I said before, when we're grasping, we're grappling, we're searching for meaning and comfort in a world which has dramatically changed and may no longer be as comforting and welcoming as what it was when we came into it. Anyway, let me turn away from the wind and finish off. Take care, everybody, and I look forward to chatting to you tomorrow from a different location, but with hopefully another observation, another message of empowerment to help us get through our morning, get through our day, and at least think about our lives in a positive and constructive way. Take care, Yassas, and all the very best.